All right, so I think we've all been actually let in from the waiting room, so we can go ahead and get started. So hi everyone, my name is Wendy Galvan and I'm one of the California Secretary of State Students Vote Project Coordinators.
Hi, everybody. My name is Kevin Brandt, and I'm one of the other student vote project coordinators here at the California Secretary of State.
So welcome to our quarterly meeting. I'm excited to see some familiar names and some new faces. So before we begin, of course, we'd love to introduce our California Secretary of State, Dr. Shirley Weber, to welcome you all and share some remarks.
Well, thank you very much, Wendy, and thank you, Kevin, and all of those who work so hard to organize your quarterly meetings and all of the activities that occur in between. I'm really proud always to be with you, to just simply to welcome you to this event, because your role in helping California achieve its goals of 100% voter participation, your role is extremely important, because those who are 18 to 25, you are key individuals in terms of us working hard to make sure that we get everyone to the polls. This is an exciting day. First of all, this is early voting day, which encourages people to think about when they're going to vote and how they're going to vote, and making sure that they make a plan to vote. So that we want to encourage people to think not only about the day that they're going to vote, but all the things that lead up to it, to make sure that they get a chance to participate. So happy early voting day to all of you who are on this call today. As you probably noticed from listening to the news and everything else, that this coming year, 2024, is going to be a big year. It's going to be a big year in election, because this is the presidential election, and there are lots of issues surrounding this election, as there was 4 years ago. But we want to emphasize the fact that it is extremely important. But we always want to make sure people understand that voting is important, period. Surely there are big days that come. There's small elections, there are recall elections, there are things that deal with special elections when people resign or things happen and we have to have an election to fill those slots. But voting is that every time there is an election, it is an important day. Generally during the presidential elections is when we have our largest turnout, and it's extremely important. And some folks wait to vote in the general election. They wait till November. We're going to encourage you, as we believe every election is important, to think about the primary that's coming up this year. Our primary is going to take place in California in March instead of the normal June. And it'll be a presidential primary, which will be important because you will have the opportunity to select the person who's going to actually run for president in either one of the parties. And that's an important decision, because sometimes you discover in the midst of November, oh my goodness, I wish so-and-so had made it out. I wish so-and-so had decided to run. Well, that can't happen when November comes, because you've made a decision as to who would be the persons you'd be choosing from come November. So we'll make sure that in March, you make that choice, that you realize that March is a primary. That's an extremely important election. There are also many other elections that occur throughout the state where the primary is the only election. That sometimes if a person gets in a primary, depending on what city and what county you're in, and they win 50% plus one in that primary, they're going to basically be the person that you'll see as the elected official, that there will not be another election in November, that the primary actually defines who's going to run and not run. So I want to make sure you realize just how important your role is in this primary, and how important it's going to be for our college campuses to be engaged, to be ready, to basically rev up the interest on the part of young people to participate and to move further in terms of getting students civically engaged, civically involved, and making sure they do. You know, we have right now between the ages of 18 and 25, we currently have registered over 3 million individuals in California, 3,909,384 individuals who are between the age of 18 and 25 are actually registered to vote. We really should have twice that many. We know that. And so that's why we're working hard to get more students registered to vote, because sounds like a great number. But when you consider California has 40 million people in California, about 28 million voters, we're still below where we should be as young people. And so we want to make sure that everybody thinks about that. Yes, we've got great numbers. We've got numbers bigger than some states in terms of voting, but given California's size and its resources and what it has to offer, we are far from the goal that we should be. Last year, we were fortunate. We registered almost 1 million individuals. We registered over 700,000 18 to 25-year-olds just in that 1 year. So we made some great strides last year, but we want to double that again and make sure everyone between the ages of 18 and 25 gets a chance to vote and is registered and prepared to vote in March as well as November. So once again, I want to thank all of you for your hard work. You've worked so hard, and you always do. You give us great ideas, great results. We love the competition that occurs on our campuses. All of you are looking at your campuses to see how we can even improve even more. I've talked with staff about things we need to deal with in terms of mailing and postal services and all those things that make a difference on our campuses that are handled a little bit differently on the campus and in the larger public. But just want you to know that we are here for you. Our staff is excited about kicking off this year and making sure that March and November are amazing times for young people to register, to have registered, and to be able to vote and have their voices heard, because this election will probably be, as we say, every election, the most important election of your life. So once again, thank you so very much. Thanks for all of you who work so hard. Thanks to our guests who are going to be speaking on a number of issues that affect young people. And we hope to hear from you, not only just in the meetings, but we hope to hear from you at the ballot box as well. Once again, thank you so very much. I'm Shirley Weber, your California Secretary of State, and I'm excited about always working with Wendy and Kevin and Janelle and Denise and just a slew of you folks who believe in young people and your right to vote. So thanks so very much.
All right, thank you so much, Secretary Weber. We really do appreciate your consistent commitment just to uplift the importance of civic engagement, especially with our young people, with our attendees today. So now we can get started with going over with our agenda. So Kevin, if you could go on to the next slide, thank you. So we have 6 key items that we'll be jumping into. The first half of the presentation, we'll talk about program updates, resources, and event announcements. Then we'll be sharing more details about our newest resource, which is called the Student Civic and Voter Empowerment Act Implementation Guide. And we've been mentioning it in previous quarterly meetings, so we're finally ready and excited to show you all the resource. After that, we will share information about the Civic and Voter Empowerment Action Plans. And then after we present on that, we will hand it over to our 2 spotlight speakers. Today with us, we have Catherine Fish from the All-In Campus Democracy Challenge, and Adam Gismondi from the Tisch College of Civic Life at Tufts University. And they will each give a presentation to strengthen civic and voter empowerment action plans as required by the Student Civic and Voter Empowerment Act, or also known as SCIVA. So we just want to make sure that we get through everything today since we have a packed agenda. So we would appreciate it to hold questions until the end of the presentation. And if we go over, we can always stay back and answer your questions. So next slide, please. So as some of you may be new faces, I know many of you are familiar faces, but we still want to make sure that we give an overview of who we are and what we do here at the Secretary of State. So essentially, the Students Vote Project aims to help register college students to vote and to become more civically engaged. And we were started as a project back in 2016 through the California Secretary of State, then Lieutenant Governor Gavin Newsom, each of the higher education systems, which include the CCCs, community colleges, CSUs, the Cal States, the independent colleges, and the University of California campuses, as well as a handful of nonprofit. We all made an agreement saying that we're going to increase civic engagement in college campuses. So that's how the Students Vote Project was born as a program. But then in 2020, we actually began to implement landmark legislation called the Student Civic and Voter Empowerment Act, and I'll refer to it as SCIVA as well, where we took some pieces of that agreement back in 2016 and made some of those into state law. And we'll get more into that implementation guide that we spoke about earlier to show you all what exactly SCIVA entails and what it means for campuses. So we also host and participate in events aimed at expanding the knowledge of voting and civic engagement. So one of the most significant events is the famous University and College Ballot Bowl competition. As the Secretary mentioned, we are very excited to be hosting it next year. And we also create easy to understand resources for young people and college students. So if you'd like to learn more, please visit our newly revamped website at studentsvote.sos.ca.gov, or please email us caststudentsvote@sos.ca.gov, and we are pretty quick to respond. So those will be dropped in the chat if they haven't already. And now I'll hand it over to Kevin to give some updates.
Thank you, Wendy. A few updates we wanted to share with you all are the current number of confirmed civic and voter empowerment coordinators we have for each system. If you'd like to update your campus's Civic and Voter Empowerment Coordinator, we have a form on our SVP homepage under the Student Civic and Voter Empowerment Act section, and this is where you'll be able to update your campus's coordinator's information. Please note that there are two forms. One is for the public institutions and the other form is for the independent colleges. So please make sure that you're filling out the correct form. Both forms will be dropped in the chat shortly. And then as a reminder, if you were able to attend our last quarterly meeting, we did a walkthrough of our newly revamped Students Vote Project webpage. Our updated website contains information about our program, the Student Civic and Voter Empowerment Act, the California University and College Ballot Bowl, and a central hub for all of our past, current, and future resources. Also, over the last couple of months, we were able to meet with many of the higher education systems and their student organizations to discuss strategies for how we can become better partners and address any barriers that certain systems may be facing. Wendy will now provide us with an overview of our meetings with the individual campuses.
Yeah, thank you, Kevin. So we met with 14 individual campuses that were representative of the different civic engagement levels and way of implementing SCIVA. Across all the 4 higher education systems. So we learned so much from these meetings, and it will definitely improve our programming, resources, and events. And then we also in turn shared a lot of information about SVP and how we can continue to be of support to these campuses. So we also host office hours just in case you are interested in having those one-on-one meetings, but we really did enjoy getting to know you all and getting to meet with these 14 different campuses. All right, so next slide, please. So in this slide, we just want to remind you of how and why we track college student voter registration. So the voter registration numbers that we track from college students is sent to the legislature every year through our annual report. And this data helps inform the legislature and the public for research and decision-making. So we encourage all campuses to have college students use the registertovote.ca.gov?T=S link, because that's the only way that we're able to collect the data. This link prompts the question, what campus the student goes to, and they're able to select it. It's exactly the same as the one without the T=S, but that last part is what helps us see which campus the student goes to. So that's one way. And then we also track it through physical voter registration cards from our office. So if you request cards from our office, we're able to track it as well. But if you're working with outside organizations, which we encourage you to, we may not be able to see the numbers because we are only able to track what leaves our office. And then when we receive it, we kind of already made a note internally. But if you're working with your county or just outside orgs, that's where we're not able to see those numbers. So we do encourage you to request from our office, and we have that information on our website on how to request physical cards. But of course, the T=S link is a little bit more easier and a little bit more streamlined. So to spread awareness of this unique link, we did create a fun voter registration button that is linked to the T=S link. And that can be added to any web page that your campus prefers. And it is kind of like an attention grabber. And in that link, you will automatically be sent to that T=S. So there's no worry of whether or not that is the correct link. And so that's going to be dropped in the chat shortly. And then you can see the number of college student voter registrations by visiting the caballotbowl.sos.ca.gov website. And we update the registrations on a monthly basis throughout the entire year. So if even though it's called Ballot Bowl, we understand that can cause confusion. So once the Ballot Bowl season, that becomes the Ballot Bowl tracker. But outside of the Ballot Bowl season, we update it monthly on a consistent basis. And then that link will also be dropped in the chat just for you to reference. And even now you can see how your campus is doing in terms of voter registrations from college students. And then the second reason that we track student voter registrations is for the California University and Ballot Bowl competition. So during the competition, the T=S should be the same link that's promoted. But this time around, when the Ballot Bowl competition is on, we update the numbers for competition purposes on a weekly basis, because the competition runs for 12 weeks. So we're a little bit more consistent when it comes to the Ballot Bowl, just because we want to kind of encourage campuses to continue trying to beat each other. But other than that, we're always using that website all year round, and we're always encouraging the T=S link. So as mentioned, only the cards requested from our office would be reflected in either the yearly registration data and in the Ballot Bowl competition. So we are internally working with our elections division to streamline the physical voter registration card collection process. Internally, we're trying to make sure that we're on the same page that when a campus requests cards to be sent from to their campus, that we're doing our part in ensuring that those cards count. But again, only if they're requested directly from our office. So so as we spoke with campuses during our individual campus meetings, we also learned that many campuses might have not been aware of the question mark T equals S link, or maybe they were working with their county ROV, which in turn made it that we wouldn't be able to see the registration that they were doing, and it was really great work. So we're going to add that note into our SVP annual report to make sure that the legislature's aware and the public's aware that these numbers may not be fully representative of all college student voter registrations, but we are definitely proactively working to ensure that campuses are more aware of the unique link, and we are also working with our elections team to streamline that physical voter registration card process that come from campuses. So hopefully, if you have any questions, we have office hours, so please ask us, and we can explain more of that. Or if you want to stay back and talk a little bit more about this process, we'll also be here at the end of the meeting. So with that said, I'm gonna now hand it over to Kevin so he can share some event announcements.
Yes, thank you, Wendy. So just a couple of event announcements and reminders, starting with office hours, which occur every Thursday from 1 p.m. to 3 p.m. Pacific time. And this is a time where Wendy and I are here to support you with any questions that you may have. So we highly encourage you all to take advantage of this time. If you still want to meet with our team, but the date and time listed does not work for you, please email us at our Cast Students Vote email to schedule an alternative time. The link to office hours as well as our email will be dropped in the chat shortly. We also want to provide a quick update on our 2024 quarterly meetings. So we plan to have our first quarterly meeting take place in late January or early February to cover our program goals and include important information about the upcoming primary election. Our second quarterly meeting will occur sometime in July and will be focused on important general election information. And we plan to share our updated student voter resource guide and ballot bowl toolkit. We will not be having a third quarterly meeting as it will be replaced by the California College Civic Empowerment Summit, which Wendy will be getting a little bit more into. And lastly, we'll have our final quarterly meeting in December, and it will cover what to do after an election. I'll now hand it back over to Wendy to cover the ballot bowl and the California College Empowerment Summit.
Yes, so as you all know, or many of you know, the ballot bowl is a friendly competition that allows all campuses in California to compete against each other to register the most students to vote. And the next competition is from August 12th, 2024 through November 5th, 2024, which is the date for the general election. So we only host this competition on statewide election years. And even within those years, it's only for the upcoming general election. So it's that 12-week in summer from August to November. And if you would like to learn more about the ballot bowl, the link will be dropped in the chat shortly. And then going on to our plans for next year in regards to the summit. So we are excited to announce that we will be having a statewide summit, similar to what we did for the 2022 general election. And we will have more updates and more information on that summit in future quarterly meetings. But as times before, we do want it to be collaborative. So we'll be connecting with students and with organizations that all work towards college student voter civic engagement. So next slide, please. So this is something that I feel like this year we spent a lot of effort and time on, me and Kevin, both in trying to meet with campuses to improve our programming, but then also translating those improvements onto our resources. So we just want to share our current, new, and upcoming resources with you all. So these resources help your campus fulfill the Student Civic and Voter Empowerment Act, but really anyone working on student civic engagement or in relation to it, or even if you have a campus housed within your county, these are very useful for you all. So the first one, as we've mentioned before, is the California Civic and Election Dates resource. And that one will be dropped in the chat shortly, but it really is what it says it is. It lists out civic engagement events and then dates that adhere to the primary and general election. So in that resource, we also mentioned that today is vote early day. So hopefully some of you were aware of that by looking at our calendar. And then we also want to just mention that the primary election is really, it's way closer than it seems. On March 5th, that's the last day for people to vote. And that is definitely less than a year away. If anything, it's a couple months away. So even though there is no statewide election this particular year in 2023, We still really encourage you all to share these dates, these resources with students or with young people so that they are aware of them and so that they make sure to update their registration if they have moved addresses or for any other reason. And then the act also requires the community colleges and the Cal States to share the dates with their students on the start of each academic semester or quarter and to post these dates on their electronic or academic calendars. So if you are a CSU or community college, a lot of campuses like to post these dates on their events calendar because they find it to be something that is more of their control versus the academic calendar. And these dates are kind of, they relate more to the events than they do really to the academic year. So if you would prefer, if your campus prefers to have these dates published either on a web page or on the events calendar where students visit, that would be very helpful. And then, so in this next, so I guess a couple months ago school started, so there should have been an email sent out, and that brings us to our next resource, the sample email that we create that can literally be copied and pasted to make sure that first semester or quarter of each academic year is sent, the email, and that template will be dropped in the chat shortly. And as the dates go by and the primary passes, you can still use the sample email language. You would just have to remove some of the dates that already passed and are no longer as relevant. But I think students appreciate the fact that they see it on a consistent basis and they aren't just seeing it for the first time a couple weeks or a couple months before the election. So then our next category is our new resources. So we will get more into detail about the SCIVA implementation guide in the next slide. And Kevin will talk a little bit more about the Civic guide, which is the Civic and Voter Empowerment Action Plan, in our next couple of slides. And then our last category here is the upcoming resources and publications. So this is what we're working on and we'll have in preparation for next year. So for as mentioned, the annual report, we have to report to the legislature as part of SCIVA on our side. So we work on this report to make sure that we highlight everything that we've done this year and everything that we've learned, and then and the data in terms of voter registration, and that gets sent to the legislature and is also published on our website. So we mainly just discuss the progress that we've made in identifying civic and voter empowerment coordinators. On election years, when we collect action plans, we'll highlight action plans, and then we also mention the list and links to the events that we've hosted in the past or have participated in, as well as our resources. So if you would like, you can definitely check out our last year report, our 2022 annual report, and that will be dropped in the chat shortly as well. And then the bottom two resources that are in the slide are our toolkits that we prepare for the general election and the ballot bowl. And we are planning to release that sometime in the middle of next year. So that way it gives enough time for campuses and counties to look through these toolkits and look at the material and reuse the material. In those toolkits, we have graphics, we have sample messaging, we have frequently asked questions, and we've seen a lot of creative things be done with these toolkits, either rebranding the entire thing and making it their own, or have students use parts of the toolkit to make skits and stories on Instagram. So really, it's just more so of a guidebook to help you kickstart the ballot bowl on your campus or with your campuses, and really kind of figure out what's relevant for college students next year ahead of the general election. And we will be having something for the primary, but not necessarily a toolkit. It would be more just graphics highlighting when the primary is, but most of our resources are catered towards the general election. And our last year's versions of them will be dropped in the chat, just so y'all can look through them if you would like to see what's gonna come up for next year. And then can we go to the next slide, please? Okay, so this is our new resource. We've really been working very hard to get this out just in time for Q3, but also so campuses can have a clear understanding of what SCIVA is. So the SCIVA implementation guide is an easy to understand guide designed to help students and coordinators, as well as organizations or even county offices, ensure that campuses are fulfilling the requirements or using it as a way to help campuses fulfill the requirements. So even though independent colleges or universities are not required to share this information, we do encourage you all to still share these resources because this information is still helpful for your students. And it's already really, already done. And so it's just a matter of kind of just sharing it out there. So we really wanted to achieve 100% implementation of civic engagement, as Secretary said. across all California campuses. So we really need support from all campuses, regardless of systems. So I understand that a lot of people that do civic engagement work don't just do civic engagement. So that's why we kind of take it upon ourselves to really make this process easier. If it really were up to just the Skiva and what it says, all we would have to do is that calendar and that's it. But me and Kevin are really passionate about making sure that we uplift the work, because at the end of the day, you know, our democracy is what matters the most. So now we can get started to look into the Skiva implementation guide. So I'll give a little walkthrough. But before I share my screen, I just want to go over the 6 components. And that's kind of how we broke down Skiva. So the first one is that finding that Civic, that Civic and Voter Empowerment Coordinator. And it could be someone that is appointed or someone that is hired for this role. And then, or it could be even students, as long as there's some type of continuation of this work. That's like the main thing, that it continues even if the student is no longer there. And then we also have the second component, which is the Civic and Voter Empowerment Action Plan. And then Kevin will get more into that, but I just want to list it as a component. Our third component is campus events, which actually the campuses, especially the community colleges and the CSUs, have to have at least 3 academic events every year. And then within those 3, there has to be one that at least is 30 days before the statewide election. So if you're hosting an event, it should be at least one of them should be, if the primaries are March 5th, there should be an event between February 5th and March 5th within that month. And the same thing for the statewide general election. And there's also that campus-wide emails thing that we mentioned earlier. So just copying and pasting that language, and then having the academic calendar updated. But I think we found that campuses found that the best way is to just share it on a certain page or on their events calendar. And then having that social media where we create a lot of the graphics for you all to just use. So I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen just so we can just kind of run through these again, and so y'all can become familiar with this new resource. So give me 1 second. All right, so you guys should all be able to see my screen. So I'm trying to make this a little bit bigger for you all. So let's see if I can do that. Okay, so essentially, you know, we just have like a formal introduction of who we are and what we do in Skiva. And then we just jump into it, and we kind of make it simple. We didn't want it to be text heavy, so we just kind of broke it down to those 6 components. And then we'll reiterate again that colleges that are not the CSUs or CCCs don't have to adhere to this, but it is a good guide to institutionalize civic engagement on your campuses. So finding that coordinator, and then making sure that they're nonpartisan, and then having that coordinator kind of act as a liaison and as the leader of the action plan, but they don't necessarily have to be the only ones that work on the action plan. And that's made clear here, that they can work with other teams and other departments to make sure that the action plan has multiple people in it, or that are able to contribute to it. And then our second component is the action plan. So as mentioned, I think the most important thing is that an action plan must include three events each academic year. And Kevin will get more into details, so I don't want to talk about this too much, but action plans are definitely something that we collect every 2 years. So the next collection of it will be October 1st, 2024. And Kevin will go more into that timeline. And then we have these campus events that there should be at least 3 at least. I know a lot of campuses do way more, and that's great, but there should be at least 3 of them. And so tabling, you know, things like that, participating in the ballot bowl, promoting the ballot bowl, and count as events. And then civic holidays count as events too. And so there should be a minimum of 3. And then as it says here, there must be, in even numbered years, there must be at least 1 event in the final 30 days preceding a statewide election, primary election or general election. And this primarily just, I guess the logic behind this is to make sure it's relevant, that there's going to be an election the next month for students, versus doing it too far out that people forget that there's going to be an election. That's primarily why they added that part in Skiva. And then we also have campus-wide emails where we list out what should be in it. And a lot of these dates are already mentioned in our calendar. So this is just more showing you all what dates should be included in those emails. we pre-draft that for you. So it's just a matter of using our other resource to just copy and paste it. And again, they should be sent out during the first month of each academic semester or quarter. So ideally, there should have been one sent out in August or September, depending on what system you're part of. And then this part here only applies for statewide election years. So in statewide election years, you would have to send out what's up here in addition to what's in the bottom. So this is only more so for getting students prepared for the election. So this is more like general information. Here are the dates. Here's what you need to know about National Voter Registration Day and like how to change your registration. But this additional part that's only meant for election years includes like our vote.ca.gov website, which shows information on the election that's coming up, the voter guide. So during elections, there should be a more detailed email that's geared toward that specific primary election or general election. And that's only during statewide election year. So we made that note there. And then our fifth component is the academic calendar. So a lot of these dates, if you look into it, are actually repetitive. It's just a matter of getting that information out there. And again, this is also shown as part of the calendar that we created for you all. And then the social media. So a lot of this is only during the election season as well. Other than that, the only one that needs to be repetitive every year is National Voter Registration Day. But all of this social media we create for you all in the toolkit that we mentioned that we will release next summer. And for the primary, there should be social media as well. So if you would like for us to create something additional to the primary day, we can do that. So we can curate graphics for the primary, but most of our work is towards the general election. But Skiva does state that there should be posts coming out ahead of the primary, and we can work to make sure that we release something like a 1-page or 2-pager so that you all have graphics to share when the primary is coming up. And then our last page is just contact us, and we have our email, SVP office hours, and really everything that you need to know is on our website. Fortunately this year we also worked on getting that cleaned up, and it's way easier to navigate. And it's currently living there now. So if you want to check it out, it's under our resources tab here under Student Civic and Voter Empowerment Act resources. So that's it for our implementation guide walkthrough. So hopefully that was helpful to you all. And Kevin, if you can just share your screen again, and we can go on to our spotlight segment. So next slide.
Yes, we will be going over our next resource.
Oh, yes, you're right.
Right on. So our second newest resource that will be made available soon is our Civic and Voter Empowerment Action Planning Guidelines. So the reason we created this resource was to provide clear guidelines on what a California action plan should include, while also following the requirements of the law. So these guidelines were inspired by the All-In Canvas Democracy Challenge's Strengthening American Democracy Guide. However, there are a few key differences to note. First, the Civic and Voter Empowerment Action Plan Guidelines, or for short, a CVEP, is a forward-thinking action plan that covers what your campus plans to do over the next 2 academic years. A CVEP also has an event requirement section where we ask campuses to summarize the civic engagement events they plan to have over the next 2 academic years. If you are a California community college or a California State University, you are required to have a minimum of 3 civic engagement events each academic year. And because a CVEP covers 2 academic years, your CVEP should contain a minimum of 6 events or more. Another key difference in a CVEP is a reflection section where we want campuses to look back on previous civic engagement efforts and reflect on what went well, but also what areas may need some improvement. Also included in this guide is a section dedicated to effective outreach events and strategies, where we provide a few sample event ideas and include a list of suggested strategies aimed at increasing civic engagement. So the deadline for your campus to submit your 2024 through 2026 CVEP is October 1st of 2024. However, we highly encourage your campus submit a draft before the deadline so our team can review and provide extra support to your plan. So we hope to have this resource made public in the coming weeks. You'll all be notified through email once the resource goes live, and it will be stored on the SVP resources page. And next, we'll be walking through a sample timeline, which would show the life cycle of 2 CVEPs. So as mentioned, this sample timeline covers the lifespan of 2 CVEPs. Everything in orange represents the 2024 through 2026 CVEP, and everything in blue would represent what would be the 2026 through 2028 CVEP. Each black box also represents 1 academic year, and as mentioned, if you're a California Community College or a California State University, your campus must have a minimum of 3 civic engagement events each academic year. So the beginning of this timeline starts in fall of 2024, and this is when your campus will submit the final version of your CVEP to the California Secretary of State and begin execution of what is in that plan. During fall of an odd numbered year, which on this timeline shows us fall of 2025, this is where we recommend planning for your campus's future CVEP, which would be the 2026 through 2028 plan. This planning time should be used to begin thinking about what you want to include in your 2026 through 2028 CVEP. Keep in mind that you would still be in the second half of finishing that 2024 through 2026 CVEP in fall of 2025. Because 1 academic year is from fall to summer, your campus technically has until the end of summer of an even numbered year, which is shown as summer 2026, to fully implement everything your campus had set out to do in a CV. Now, when fall 2026 comes around, your campus should be fully finished with executing everything in that 2024 through 2026 plan and submit and execute your 2026 through 2028 plan. The process continues to replicate itself as in fall of an odd numbered year, which is fall of 2027. We recommend your campus begin to think about the next CVEP and so on and so forth. And so we understand this is a very new process. So if you have any questions in regard to this resource, please hold them until the end of today's meeting, where we're more than happy to stay back and answer any questions that you may have. And now Wendy will be bringing us into our next segment, where we will be hearing from our spotlight speakers.
Yeah, thank you all very much for hearing our updates so far. So far we've covered our unique link, upcoming events, and our current resources, as well as our new resources. So now we will shift over to our spotlight speaker segment. And our first spotlight speaker is Catherine Fish, who is the managing director of at All In Campus Democracy Challenge. And she will be presenting on what action plans are and how they are helpful for your campus. So take it away, Kat.
Thank you. I will just share my screen here. So it's great to be with everyone. Thank you so much for including me. Kat, Managing Director with the All in Campus Democracy Challenge. And it's a pleasure to be here and talk about something as important as democratic engagement action planning on campuses. So the All In Challenge is an initiative of Civic Nation, which is a nonpartisan 501c3 nonprofit. We support nearly 1,000 colleges across the country with their nonpartisan democratic engagement and student voting efforts. So we work with a ton of schools in California and are really appreciative of our partnership with the California Secretary of State's office. So thank you for having me. And I'm just going to talk a little bit about how you can prepare and what an action plan looks like, so that when you're working on it, you know about a few resources and tools that can help you with the process. So what is an action plan? An action plan is a document that is developed by individuals or a campus coalition to be effective at institutionalizing and increasing nonpartisan democratic engagement and student voting on your campus. So we think of this as a living, breathing document. You can edit it as things evolve and change. We encourage all campuses to have this so that they have that institutional knowledge that is recorded and can be passed along and shared with stakeholders. And it's important to develop that action plan because this document really helps you grow and build on itself. So the knowledge is never lost. You never have to return to square one because you always have a recording of what you did before in the previous election cycle. We also find that it's really helpful for helping with student turnover and staff turnover. So helping members of a campus coalition or student voting advocates really get up to speed on where things are on a campus and how they can plug in. And it also helps centralize the planning and implementation of these efforts. So there's not a lot of replicating work or reinventing the wheel. It helps people be more coordinated in their efforts. And then finally, action planning shows that campuses are committed. So when you write something down, it suddenly becomes more important. It really does, because there's a plan in place, a strategy that is sort of an official roadmap for where you're going. And we really appreciate the California Secretary of State's CVP requirements for community colleges and California state universities are in place. So it really encourages the swath of campuses across the state to create these plans. And then our team is on hand to provide feedback and support to executing them and improving them. So who develops an action plan? As I mentioned, only 30 there can be many people involved in this process. You can have a campus coalition that is made up of hopefully different stakeholders like students, faculty members, administrators, community partners. And one of the key pieces of action plan that we really encourage you to include is a leadership succession piece. So only 31% of campuses had a leadership succession plan in their action plan. So we think this is so important because it helps this work continue when there is student and staff turnover. So as you're writing your plan, think of that succession piece. Who will do this work when you are no longer there so that it continues? And how another piece to plug into your plan is thinking about how new leaders or new coalition members are selected and onboarded. And then thinking too about how this work can potentially live in someone's job description so that it is really institutionalized, or how there can be advocacy for it to be added. For someone to get paid for this work can be really important. So when to develop an action plan. Kevin outlined a timeline for the All-in-Campus Democracy Challenge. We have our first campus submission opportunity is December 15th, 2023. That is the first opportunity for campuses to submit and get feedback in the early new year from our team about how their action plan can be improved and made stronger. Our second one is the spring in May 31st, which coincides with the voter-friendly campus action plan deadline. And then October 1st, 2024 is our final submission opportunity. So we really encourage you to submit plans before then. And that also coincides with the last opportunity for All-in's Most Engaged Campus and awards and recognition. So it's really key to get a plan in before that point. It's only a month before the presidential election. So hopefully you have a plan in place by then. Great. And then the deadline for California community colleges and California state universities to submit a CVP to the California Secretary of State's, the SVP, was included in the timeline, and we will make sure that you all have that information going forward, so there's no confusion. So I think that is some of the basics of what I wanted to say. We really appreciate the work you're doing. It is so critical. The All-in Challenge team is here to help. I'm Kat again, and I'm the lead with California Campuses. And think of me as sort of a coach, a support. I'm here if you have questions, and I will be sure to drop my contact information in the chat. Thanks for having me. Back to you, Wendy.
Yes, thank you, Kat. So are there any questions for Kat? If you do have a question for her, we can unmute you if you raise your hand, or you can also just type it in the chat and I can read through them. Give you a couple seconds. All right, so I don't see any questions or any raised hands. So thank you so much for your presentation, Kat. So we really appreciate you having to present. Oh, we do have a raised hand. So we have Veronica. So let's see if we can get her to unmute.
Okay, this is Frankie Moore. I'm the coordinator of student activities and student government at Moreno Valley College, and I did put a question in the chat to Kevin. Basically, I just want to know if this slide deck will be available for dissemination. As a coordinator, I'm working with my dean as the key personnel here on our campus, and I was apologizing for being late. Hi, Kat. We've spoken over the phone and email, and I just wanted to see if I could have a copy of this slide deck, if it's to be available to us afterwards.
Yes, so we will be sending out a post-event email that'll contain pretty much everything that we discussed in today's meeting, including the presentation slides.
Wonderful. Thank you so very much.
Right on. If there are no further questions, we're going to go ahead and move to our next slide. And so just quickly, before we move on to our next speaker, I'd like to quickly reiterate the key differences between our action plan and All-In's action plan. So a CVEP is a forward-thinking action plan that covers what a campus plans to do over the next 2 academic years. A CVEP is required to be submitted to the California Secretary of State by California community colleges and California State Universities, according to the Student Civic and Voter Empowerment Act. A CVEP should include an event requirement section, which should summarize the civic engagement events a campus plans to have each academic year for the upcoming 2 academic years. Keep in mind, if you're a California community college or a California State University, you're required to have a minimum of 3 civic engagement events each academic year. And because a CVEP covers 2 academic years, this section should have a minimum of 6 events or more. And one important note is during an election year, an event must occur within 30 days preceding a statewide election. So for example, we have that primary election on March 5th of 2024, which means your campus would need to have at least one event between February 5th, 2024 and March 5th, 2024. And lastly, we encourage campuses that submit a CVEP to the California Secretary of State also submit their CVEP to All-In and receive national recognition. And please note that you may submit a draft of your CVEP earlier than the October 1st deadline to us to receive additional support and feedback from both of our organizations. So we will now be hearing from our next spotlight speaker, Adam Gismondi, Director of the National Study of Learning, Voting, and Engagement from Tufts University. Adam will be providing us with an overview of the study and how it can be beneficial for campuses. Adam, I'll hand it over to you whenever you're ready to begin your presentation.
Thanks so much, and excited to be here today. My name is Adam Gismondi. I work at Tufts University, so I'm on the opposite coast, just north of Boston at Tufts University. And hopefully many of you have heard of the National Study of Learning, Voting, and Engagement, or NSOLV for short. We have been around for about 11 years now. We're coming up on the reporting cycle from the 2022 election. It takes about a year to process all the data, but hopefully, like I said, many of you are familiar with us already, but I'll still give you a little bit of background on it. So historically, our office was housed under the Institute for Democracy in Higher Education, and so our historical areas of focus include broad looks at democracy, campus climate, college student voting, political equity, and discourse and discussion on campus. And so kind of in that framework is where NSOLV has historically existed for us. But NSELF specifically is there's a few things to know about it right off the bat. So it's a free service for campuses. Like I said, it goes back about a decade. We have data for every even year national election. So 2012, 14, 16, 18, 2020. And like I said, soon we'll have the 2022 federal election. It's a database for research and it's the largest study of college student voter engagement and political learning in the United States. At the moment, we're well over 1,200 colleges and universities around the country, including many in the state of California. Always looking to get more, but there are a little over 4,000 universities in the country, colleges and universities, depending on how you count. So we have a pretty large number of the total. And over 10 million college students are reflected in the data each year, which is well over half of all college students nationally. The study reaches into all 50 states, plus DC, and we're always working to make sure that the database that we have is as close a reflection of the full national population of students as possible. So just to give you a kind of a quick snapshot, in the most recent election in which we've reported, the 2020 election, we shared some really good news. This has actually been a trend over the last few elections in terms of student participation. About 2/3 of college students nationally voted in the last presidential election, which was up from 52% in the last comparable election, which was 2016. This is pretty amazing to our team because it's actually the first time that we've seen student rates happen at about the same rate as the national student rate. Over 4 in 5 students registered to vote, and about 4 out of every 5 students that registered actually showed up to vote, which is this last number here, the yield rate. You can do kind of a deeper dive into the numbers on our website, and there's a free report up there called Democracy Counts 2020 with this covered. So if you've maybe heard of NSolve or you're just hearing about it now and you're like, should my campus sign up? Why? What is the point of this? This is what's in a campus report. So you sign up, and if your campus is interested in joining our study, we have a 2-page form. It's very quick, it's very short. It just needs to be signed by someone at kind of a senior level position. And we run through that on our website to just make sure you know who it is. So obviously, like, your president could sign, but so could a dean of students. So when you sign up, your campus designates 3 people to receive the reports. The president's office, the institutional research office on your campus, and a 3rd person that's entirely up to the university to decide. So oftentimes that's someone that's very involved in civic engagement. So possibly many of you on this call would be that 3rd person. If you have a civic engagement center on campus, oftentimes it's a staff there, someone from student affairs maybe, or maybe it's a faculty member that leads the work on campus. But if your campus is involved, but you're not sure who the report recipients are, and the report's maybe not posted publicly or easily accessible, you can always email our office and we can help you track down the report. So when you sign up for a report, like I said, when we get to the point in the cycle where we share back your analyzed data, you'll get an email with a PDF attached to it, and it'll have a cover like this. And there's 15, 20 pages of data in it. And you turn it right open after a little bit of an intro to it, you'll see the top line numbers. You'll see what your campus's voting rate was in the most recent election. You'll see the change from the most recent comparable election to that most recent election. And then you'll get a lot of comparison data. So, what do our numbers mean relative to the national numbers? What does our numbers mean relative to similar institution types? And then we break down the data for your institution by field of study. So you can see how students are voting in STEM areas in terms of numbers versus liberal arts versus engineering, et cetera. So it's a pretty useful tool for digging into the numbers, but we also break it down in terms of demographics. So race and ethnicity, sex, age, for graduate student versus undergraduate student. And we'll talk a little bit in a minute here about why that's useful. So how do campuses use their reports once they receive them? So there are really almost countless ways in which we've seen their reports used, but just kind of a sampling here. What these data provide for you is a way for reaching different areas of campus. So when you think about your civic engagement and civic learning efforts, what we offer you in this report is a way to think about, well, who's being left behind, who's participating in the system and who's not. Where are there some equity gaps in terms of when you think about this in terms of political equity? Which are the different populations of campus, and like I said, who is participating and who's not. And then you can think about your efforts and think, well, maybe we're not doing such a great job at reaching these students versus these students, and you can start targeting your efforts, but also thinking broadly about the whole of your campus. NSLV reports are often used as a starting point and a centerpiece for campus dialogue and learning, for action planning, which you heard Kat just talk about. Hi, Kat. Oftentimes NSLV data is built into programs like orientation, residence life, and then is used as part of civic holidays, events like Constitution Day, speakers on campus. It's often a way to kind of set up, our campus talks about these things in general terms, but what does it actually look like in practice? The data is also really useful as a way of engaging faculty and senior leaders on campus, because what it offers is credibility. Sometimes people refer to NSLV wrongly as a survey. It's not a survey, it's actually a study of actual behavior. So the reason it takes almost a year or sometimes more than a year to report the data back is because what we're doing is telling you actually whether or not students voted, whether they registered in an anonymized way that protects student privacy, but you see like actual numbers in terms of how many people turned out. But bringing those data to faculty members is a way to say, it's proof, it's credibility, it's quantitative analysis of this phenomenon. You can also use it to work with other campuses and think about comparisons across groups. And it's also used often for assessment and accreditation on campus when you're thinking about student engagement and civic learning and participation. I know we're limited on time, so I'll just point you to a couple of resources. Up on our website, which is idhe.tufts.edu, you'll find a few really important resources, including our Election Imperatives report series. And on this, you'll find what we did was we took the NSLV data nationally, we did some qualitative research and campus visits, and we put it all together for recommendations for practice for your campus. The report that has this purple cover, Election Imperatives version 2.0, is kind of our evergreen version of it. And then we actually did an updated version called Election Imperatives 2020 that really has resonance still today, thinking about centering racial justice and thinking about kind of what we've been through since the start of the pandemic and since kind of this country's restarting of an overdue reckoning on race. So thinking about this from a social justice perspective and thinking about it in terms of campus safety. If you want to reach us, if you go to idhe.tufts.edu, you can find all of our email addresses right up on the website. I put my email up here and I'll drop it in the chat, adam.gizmondi@tufts.edu. You can also email nsolv@tufts.edu or follow us on Twitter and we'll be happy to get back to you. I will turn it back over to Kevin.
Yes, thank you, Adam, so much for your wonderful presentation today and being able to share the National Study of Learning, Voting, and Engagement with all of our campus partners here today. If there are any questions for Adam, please feel free to either type them in the chat or raise your hand to be unmuted. All right, seeing none. Does anybody in the audience have any questions from items discussed in today's meeting? Okay, I see a hand raised here. You should have the permissions to unmute. Hello.
Hi, yeah, it's Lynn in LA. I am a volunteer who goes to different campuses to register voters, and I found your websites and your projects by chance. I wonder if there's something I can do to get the campuses that I go to participate. I know I thought about meeting with the dean of students perhaps, but yeah, I mean, I'm a single person trying to register as many kids as possible. It's hard for me as a single one human being. It would be great if the institutions could be there to do it and make it more massive. So do you have any suggestions or, tips for me?
Yes, so some campuses, or so the California community colleges and California state universities are typically required by law to assign or have a civic and voter empowerment coordinator. And that's probably the individual that you would want to try and communicate with. Typically, it's somebody at like student life or somewhere at like the student affairs office. But we can kind of maybe talk a little bit more offline to see what campus that you're looking to specifically connect with, and we can further assist you from there. Right on.
All right, and then we had a question in the chat for Adam. This is from Jerry. He's asking if Adam was able to give us an idea of when the NSOLV reports will be available for the 2022 midterms.
I'm sorry, I was just dropping a link in the chat.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
I assure you that the work for that is in progress right now. We have a newsletter and we'll be mailing out probably a more specific date estimate for them. But we anticipate it coming out sooner than later this year. But we'll be sharing that info as soon as we have it.
All right, thank you. So for our announcements, as mentioned, we will have our first quarterly meeting next year, either in late January, early February. So we're talking about preparation for the March primary and some of our SVP highlights of 2023. And now I'll hand it over to Kevin.
Right on. Well, that's the end of our quarterly meeting today. We thank you all for attending. Please keep an eye out for our post-event email, which should be sent out in the next week. And it will include today's event recording, as well as all the resources discussed today. So if there are no further questions, again, we thank you all for attending our meeting today, and to have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you all so much. All right, thanks, Adam. Thanks, Kat.
Thank you.